Good morning. Today is December 1st, 2024. Let's begin by making aspirations and setting our intentions by saying the four immeasurables prayer. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from the happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment, anger, and aversion. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to start with a quote from our teacher, Garchen Rinpoche, who some of you are familiar with, and those of you who are not familiar with, I encourage you to. You can see a lot of his teachings on YouTube. We've been students of him since 2010, and his generosity and kindness has been hugely impactful on our lives and the lives of many. And if any of what we do here interests you, I encourage you to really make yourself acquainted with him. He really encouraged this class, and it was really his request that this class happen and continue. So we're really here because of him. So I'm going to read this quote by him. There are many thoughts that always arise, but thoughts are impermanent. They come and go. The mind from which they arise, however, abides like space. It never comes and goes. It is always there. It has always been there, and it will always be there. It is like space or a vast ocean. It never goes anywhere, just like space. Therefore, do not cling to the temporary thoughts. No matter how much you cling to them, you cannot actually hold on to them, as they are impermanent by nature. Rather, observe that which never goes away. The clear, knowing awareness that recognizes all the thoughts arising. This awareness is the Buddha within you. It is your true nature. Whatever thoughts arise, negative thoughts, sadness, afflictive emotions, do not follow them, but continue to observe with mindfulness. When this mindfulness is sustained, arising thoughts will naturally dissipate without the need to abandon them. This awareness must be upheld not only in meditation sessions, but also during all your activities. No matter what you experience, happiness or suffering, it does not affect your awareness. It always is as it is. This nature is Buddha nature, and every being has it. That quote is particularly pertinent to this class because when early on in this class, we were asking Rinpoche about continuing, and he said, really focus when you do these talks, because we're not teachers, Victoria and I, we can give you meditation instructions and read quotes from masters like Garchen Rinpoche and discuss our own personal experiences. It's very different than actually, studying with an authentic teacher from an authentic lineage who was dedicated his entire life and probably many lifetimes to the study of Buddha Dharma and the practice of Buddha Dharma. So we always encourage anyone here who really wants to connect with these teachings to really look for these authentic teachers from the authentic lineages, many of whom we put on the Solidago Productions website. There's books and there's names of teachers, and you can find them online on YouTube and in person if you want, for many of them. But Rinpoche said, when you talk about Buddha Dharma, just focus on the mind, because Buddha is not the name of a person, it's the name of mind, which he really elaborated on in this quote that I just read. So Um, as we go into the practice of meditation now, keep that in mind. Um, this awareness that Rinpoche so eloquently described, is our own Buddha nature, and it is something that is always accessible to us, and it is it's the arena, the theater from which all these thoughts arise and dissipate and come out of and disappear, leaving this, vast expanse of the nature of mind unstained and untainted, really unaffected. But it takes a lot of practice, and it takes a lot of discipline, and it takes a commitment to start to work with the mind that way and observe our thoughts in that respect, both in the formal practice of sitting meditation and, like Rinpoche said, in our daily lives. Checking in throughout the day in our daily life, like checking into our awareness, tuning into that awareness, rather than just being led throughout the day by strong emotions, negative emotions, benign emotions, spaced out kind of states of mind, really checking into our awareness, knowing that our mind is Buddha, Buddha is the name of mind, and knowing that that's there and actually kind of making contact with that throughout the day is really, really, really extremely valuable and important. And it's not something that, has to be sustained for long periods of time. It's probably going to be hard, it's not easy to do that. But the effort of checking in and the kind of awareness that it's important to check in that way, interacting with other people, you know, um, the difficulty and kind of busyness of our daily lives, the habitual routine, um, ingrained mental states of our daily lives, to kind of somehow check, let the mind settle, be in that spaciousness, watch the thought just dissipate, have that moment of calm, maybe try to act out of that place in the next moment. Really, really important. So we'll practice, we'll sit, we'll meditate a bit, and Victoria's going to read some things that she's prepared today. So for now, let's get into the meditation posture. So we're sitting on the floor, cross-legged, but really however you feel comfortable. For some people that's difficult. Use a cushion so your hips are even or above your knees. If you need some back support, you can do that. If you need to sit in a chair because of certain physical limitations, you can do that. Just the same thing applies. Try to have your hips either aligned or above your knees, your feet flat on the floor if you're in a chair, and your back straight. Back straight, but not like rigid. You don't want a lot of tension in the body, but you do want a certain alertness, like a subtle amount of tension, like the guitar string. We use that example a lot. Just enough tension to make the tone. Too slack, no tone. Too tight, no tone. It's the same thing. You want to have the back straight, so these subtle energy channels are aligned and can, let energy flow unimpededly through the subtle body channels. It's also, the body and mind are connected, so that kind of subtle alertness in the body translates to this, subtle alertness in the mind. If it's too tense, the mind is too tense. If it's too slack, the mind is too sluggish. So, the hands, you usually do this like the left hand open and the back of the right hand on top of it, resting in the lap. Or you can have your hands down, palms down on the knees. Head is slightly tilted forward. In this class, we usually breathe through the nose. If you can't, you can breathe through the mouth. So the lips are lightly closed, the teeth are a little bit apart, and the tongue is resting between the roof of the mouth and the back of the top teeth. And our eyes are open, resting on whatever is in front, not spacing out, not kind of intensely focused, but just resting on whatever's there. And in that position, let's start to breathe. Just whatever, simple, easy breath, easy rhythm that's happening. And at the same time, just like let the tension in the body and the mind just kind of settle. And I'm going to start the timer here. Yeah, so really let this tension just settle. Focus on the breath. Maybe focus on where the breath is going in and out of the nostrils, where the, upper lip meets the nostrils. Focus your attention there. Letting the tension go. And it's in this settling and stillness that allows us this moment to glimpse what our mind is doing. That awareness, what Rinpoche talked about. And tune into that awareness. And that awareness is probably going to notice a thought that has arisen in the mind. The thought has come from the mind, nowhere else but the mind. And once you're aware of that thought, instead of following it or pushing it away, we focus back on the breath, or say back to the breath, and put our attention back on the breath. Or we see it as a cloud that has arisen out of this sky-like nature of mind, this limitless, calm, peaceful clarity that's aware. And the cloud has arisen in that very sky, and we watch it just dissolve back into it and settle back into that calm clarity. And these techniques you will repeat many times during a session. So whatever comes up, comes up. We're not controlling it, just observing what's happening and watching it go back to where it came. Watch it dissolve. We're not following the story of the thought that has arisen, leaving it where it is. And when it dissolves, we settle back into that spaciousness, that calm, that clarity, unstained, limitless blue sky, sky-like nature of mind. Back to the breath. Be aware of what's going on in the mind, whatever thought is there. Don't follow the story of the thought. Don't think it's wrong. Don't push it away. Just watch it dissolve into the sky-like nature of mind and settle back into the vast, calm, cognizant, sky-like nature of mind. If you need to shift, feeling a lot of tension, you know, if that's what you need to do, and then settle back into the posture, settle back into the breath, to the calm. Great. So that's meditation, and it shouldn't be looked at as um, how well you did or how bad you did. It's that's not how we should take measure of this experience. This is meditation. The two big misconceptions, especially to those who are just starting in this practice. One is that I can't meditate because I have a very busy mind. Everybody's mind is busy. The mind thinks. The mind has thoughts. Um, Even the great masters have thoughts, you know. They just have learned to, work with them and let them arise and let them go. Um, the mind thinks. If we didn't have thoughts, nobody would need to meditate. If we didn't have busy minds, no, there would be you, um, no need to learn the practice of meditation. So everybody's mind is busy. Yours is not more unique than someone else's, I'm sorry to say. The other misconception is that meditation is about not thinking. And again, what we read from Garchen Rinpoche and what we were doing in the practice is it's not getting to a state of no thoughts. It's working with the thoughts, becoming aware of how they arise, what's their flavor, what's their energy, letting them go. The word in Tibetan for meditation is gom, which means to habituate. So, in Tibetan Buddhist tradition, which is what we practice, this practice is called habituation, if you want to use the Tibetan translation. Habituation of what? Habituation of working with the mind, of looking at the mind, seeing, you know, the mind's limitless clarity and awareness and spaciousness, and seeing how thoughts arise within that. And there's different charges of thought, maybe like one's like a storm cloud, intense anger, intense fear, worry, or desire. Some are just more subtle, wispy cloud. Think of all the different types of clouds there are, but they're all coming from the sky, and they all dissolve back into the sky, and none of them are permanent ever. They might be repetitive, but they're not certainly not permanent. This is really valuable to do every day. This kind of practice, and habituation is repeat, getting used to it, getting used to working with your mind this way. It's not going to happen by doing once a month or once a week or something like that. It really takes, it's like if you want to get in shape to run a marathon, you have to, really commit to, very regular discipline and training and things like that. But you don't have to commit to a lot of time, especially in the beginning. It could be short sessions. If you're really brand new, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just to get you, on the cushion daily or almost daily. With that, Victoria has some words she'd like to share with you.
Good morning. So, we'll come back to what Michael was saying about meditation. I wanted to speak to the subject of what is and what is not Buddhist meditation. When we go to a yoga class, we lay on the mat, and someone says, do this and this, relax your body. Is that Buddhist meditation? No. We're walking through the park, we're listening to the birds, we're watching the sky, we're listening to music on our iPod. Is that meditation? No. It may be focus practice. It may be where we bring and place our attention, but it is not, strictly speaking, Buddhist practice. What is Buddhist practice? Buddhist practice is something that begins with beginning, middle, and end is bodhicitta. That is why we begin every session with 4 immeasurables. That's what Buddhist practice begins with, the correct motivation. The motivation to liberate and bring all sentient beings to the state of enlightenment, past suffering, past samsara, past impermanence, and all these kinds of things. That wish, what is called bodhicitta, to establish all sentient beings in a state of Buddhahood, is the right, is the Buddhist practice. So it begins with that motivation. In the middle, whatever we do, such as observing our mind, seeing that thoughts are appearances and appearances are mind, relaxing those appearances, especially in difficult places, that's the middle of the practice, whatever the practice may be, whether we're, visualizing ourselves in such and such form and, liberating all the 6 realms, whether we're doing Tonglen, whatever practices and the difficulty level of practice, the middle, so to say, the main practice, we're always also doing it for the benefit of all sentient beings. And in the end, we dedicate the merit of all the practice to and for the benefit of all sentient beings. The only benefit is, temporary and ultimate state of freedom from suffering and from samsara, meaning that we instate all sentient beings in state of Buddhahood. That's truly the Buddhist practice. So to kind of dispel any a non-clarity, to dispel any kind of misnomers, to dispel, any kind of confusion about what is truly Buddhist practice and what it's not. It's when the practice begins with the motivation, when the practice is focused on benefiting sentient beings, even when the practice is focused on ourselves, we're working with the appearances of the mind, which is the thoughts, so that we can ease them and know how to work with them when situations arise, and then dedicating the merit of any kind of practice. That is what we can truly call Buddhist practice. All the other kinds of things like spacing out on the cushion, working, relaxing, with this and that, those could be like preliminary little things, or other kinds of forms of things, even when we work with our attention. But when we don't include bodhicitta, it is not ever to be thought of as Buddhist practice. It is something else. So, that is a very clear answer to dispel confusion. This is very direct. If we don't work with bodhicitta as a beginning, middle, and end, we are not doing Buddhist practice. When we say that aspiration prayer in the very beginning of the class, the 4 immeasurables, may all beings have happiness, etc. Please, let's think into it when we say that, because that is the key to all the practice. If we sit down on a cushion and we don't really understand why we're sitting there, it's kind of a waste of time. Maybe we're acquainting our body with being able to sit. Maybe we slow down. Maybe we, but those are preliminary things. Those are not yet really the beginning of what we call practice. Our practice begins with our motivation, the mind of bodhicitta. Only Buddhist practitioners begin with that as an aspiration, do the practice, and then dedicate the merit of that practice to liberating all sentient beings from the ocean of suffering, of cyclic existence. And to liberate means to instate and bring all sentient beings to complete enlightenment. We are always included. When we say all sentient beings, we are included with all sentient beings. Liberation here means not to also just take away momentary suffering. For example, when we feed someone, we give them momentary relief from suffering of hunger. But in a couple of hours or tomorrow, that suffering returns. This is the cyclical nature of suffering and samsara. That is our condition. What we really aspire for, the mind of bodhicitta, is to liberate them from all suffering and make it not just a temporary relief, but complete state of enlightenment where there is no longer any kind of suffering. In many ways, it's easy to think of it as now, because of our dimness, our ignorance, and ignorance really in Buddhism means very specific things. It means having the 5 afflictions that drive and create all the force that drive our action and therefore create karma, and the more kind of like the subtle level of that force of the 5 afflictions, which always originates with self-grasping, this notion of I and other, this kind of split up dualistic mind. From that dualistic, that base sense of ignorance of dualism, come the 5 afflictions, which kind of encapsulate the I, because the I wants everything for oneself. Therefore, we have hatred, we have desire, we have jealousy. It's because when the energy comes out of the basis of self-grasping, the 5 afflictions, which are originally 5 wisdoms, the 5 afflictions are the things that motivate and propel all the activity of our body, speech, and mind. So to counter that, there's only one thing, and that is the mind of bodhicitta. And so what is this mind of bodhicitta? In fact, it's not anything that we can encapsulate into dualistic conceptual mind. But bodhicitta is a state of awareness that understands the nature of reality of self, of others, of things, of phenomena, of just how things are. And that we can only get in meditation. But, we do need to speak about it. So we have kind of conventional ways of speaking about something that transcends conventionality, transcends conceptual dualistic mind. And when we speak about bodhicitta, the easiest way to understand it is to say that it is clarity, because it's like the mind of enlightenment. It's when the dimmer switch is fully on and there is no more darkness of ignorance. And it is the clarity and love, because it's compassion. And they're wrapped into one. They're like the sun rays, right? They have the light and the warmth, and it's one thing. They're not separated. The warmth comes out of the light. This is what the mind of bodhicitta. That's why try never to separate that bodhicitta is a mind of enlightenment and the mind of compassion. It's the same thing. Enlightenment and compassion are one thing. Light and warmth, they're inseparable. There is no bodhicitta without the light, without like enlightenment, and there's no bodhicitta without compassion, because if we are not thinking about the benefit of others, we're still in the darkness of self-grasping. So they cannot exist one without the other. Also, when I desire to liberate all sentient beings, my ignorance is broken. It's transcended. In other words, mind of bodhicitta, aspirational bodhicitta, when we start the motivation, it's the only method, it is the only means to break, transcend, and go beyond this mind of self-grasping that keeps me in this darkness, in this kind of afflictive state, this kind of like, for me, mine, I need this, etc., etc. It's the only antidote, it's the only chance of like activating our Buddha nature, because our Buddha nature is not like a thing far away that we can buy on the market by reading lots of books. Our Buddha nature, the nature of all sentient beings, is something that's always there. We can only get to it by putting the switch on through meditation, through hearing, pondering, and meditation, those three things, the three wisdoms. It's the only chance that we have of getting out of this state of suffering and samsara, which is the mind of ego grasping and that dualistic mind. It's also the mind that makes our practice truly Buddhist rather than something else. It's the method that turns our mind from the state of ignorance and dualism, which is another word for self-grasping, to a state of enlightenment. By desiring to liberate all sentient beings is when we can truly touch our Buddhahood, our seed of Buddhahood, when we desire to bring and eliminate suffering from for all sentient beings. It's the only thing that activates our own possibility of igniting our own Buddhahood. So we have to go there together. We have to desire the complete enlightenment and release from suffering, from ignorance of all sentient beings, and that in turn ignites our own possibility of liberation. We and all mother sentient beings have to travel to Buddhahood at the same time, together. There's no, like, I'm sitting here, I'm going to get all enlightened, and, all these ignorant sentient beings next to me. So this is what really is, kind of how we enter into Buddhist practice. Now, practically, how do we get to that state? Well, it's actually very simple. The clothes I wear, the water I drink, the house I live in, the four elements that surround me, the air I breathe, when I get sick, the doctors that come and tend to me. This is truly like the limitless interconnectedness. We use our rational mind, our analytical faculty, to understand limitless connections by the love and by the force of which I live. I am sitting here because of compassion, because of limitless love of other sentient beings and the universe, right? I mean, I have the air that I breathe. Everything I do, a cup of tea connects me to limitless sentient beings. The underwear I wear connects me to limitless sentient beings. The food I buy in the supermarket connects me to limitless sentient beings. The bees, the worms, all these kinds of things, the people who pick it, who package it, etc., etc. So we take this mind, because we have a big kind of like, we speak about emptiness in Buddhism all the time. The emptiness in Buddhism is not like a shopping bag that's empty. In Buddhism, emptiness means that there is no one thing that exists all by itself autonomously, because all things are aggregates, and so in other words, what we're saying, the word emptiness, another word for emptiness in Buddhism means interdependence. I don't exist here independently by myself. That's just ignorance, my ego telling me, oh, I'm here, I'm sitting here, I'm thinking about others. But actually, I'm sitting here as an interconnected event. I cannot sit here without the kindness of all limitless sentient beings, starting from the floor in which I'm sitting, in the house in which I'm sitting, the space of internet through which we're talking right now and trying to, meditate together and lift ourselves from this base ignorance. We are interdependent, interconnected, infinite events. And so we take that analytical thought, this level of thinking, because that's really how things are. The ignorance is what makes us think, I'm here all by myself, like I don't need only breath. Each moment I empty out my lungs, I could be dying. Each inhale that I take, I have another moment to live, etc., etc. The food, the drink, the air, all these kinds of things. That is what we call, the word for interconnectedness is the same word as emptiness. In other words, nothing exists independently. And so that's how we need to understand emptiness in Buddhism, right? It's another way, like a lead in to understand that we cannot liberate ourselves without liberating all other sentient beings. Our personal liberation depends on the mind of bodhicitta, our desire to liberate all other sentient beings. It's like the fuel that ignites our own everything. So, and again, in Buddhism, we take it, of course, to a little bit like further extent. We don't keep this interdependence just this kind of a scientific dead space, molecular interdependence kind of a thing. Actually, we think of all sentient beings as our mothers. And, they are mothers in this life and all our other lives. We call all sentient beings our mothers because it is explained to us when we begin in Buddhism, when we initiate the journey. Rinpoche, when the first time that I went to a teaching, Rinpoche said, all are mother sentient beings. All sentient beings are limitless sentient beings are our mothers, because we have lived here so long in this ignorant state of self-grasping and dualism that through these limitless lifetimes, we have accumulated so much skin that it could like create countless planets. We have had so much blood that it's like limitless oceans. And we have had so much bone, etc., etc. And through these limitless lifetimes, we have been children and mothers to all beings, all sentient beings in all the realms and all the cyclical goings and comings and goings. So, so this is how we're connected to all sentient beings. So when we take that into meditation and we kind of like try to take this conceptual knowing, when we take it into meditation and with our heart, we try to connect to all sentient beings and send them this desire, this wish to may they be liberated. We connect to all things. And that's really how meditation starts. Another form of meditation is what Michael just described. The initial forms of meditation, when we are observing our mind and we are kind of starting to experience the space of awareness where all sentient beings connect. This is like our internet. This is where we all connect and we all are. And we all have, in our space of limitless awareness, these appearances appear, our thoughts, our particular thoughts. We start to understand that these are appearances and these appearances are our mind. So next time a difficult person walks into the room, we understand that what we call difficult comes from our side. We project that onto people. As meditators, we drop this kind of naive notion that things out there cause experiences in our mind. We're past that level. As practitioners, we know that when our ego gets wounded, we shoot back with afflictions, and then we make that or call that person a difficult person, a bad person, a this and this person, instead of understanding that a person, when they are afflicted by ignorance and this energy of ignorance, the 5 afflictions, that they are acting like a person on fire. They're burning everything in their way. So what do we do as practitioners? Do we add more to that burden? Do we call them enemies? Do we call them, do we put our hate into that fire, into that messiness? Or do we kind of hold back and understand we see a person doing bad things? Again, these are projections, these are appearances. We see a person acting in a certain kind of way. We have to understand that a person acting out of mind of ignorance and mind of affliction, mind of selfishness, is acting like a person who, who's on fire, because they're acting just out of that space of afflicted mind and ignorance, out of this darkness. So instead of adding to them, instead of, responding with hate, we respond with mind. It's actually, Nick, can we bring up that prayer, please? in Buddhism, when we take refuge and we start to really kind of practice this on a serious level, this is our first prayer with which we start all our practices. May all sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they have happiness, be free from suffering, and may I swiftly establish them in complete precious Buddhahood. We start with that because we know that the work has to be done where we have difficult places, right? Where we have obstacles, where we're dealing with illness, with loss, we're dealing with difficult people. This is kind of like the alpha of our practice, because we don't need to deal with places where we don't have difficulty, where our mind is naturally at ease and is okay, and our wishing is, positive. We have to start work where we have difficult places, where we have hatred, where we have rejection, where we have, those are the places where we have to start our work. And please remember that afflictive states of mind that we bring out from ourselves are like magnets. Our energy, good energy and negative energy, positive energy and negative energy, is like a magnet. When we are colored, when our mind is like hijacked and colored by negativity, let's say, anger, we wake up next day and we still have anger. When we meet anybody, we expect bad things from them because our mind, that anger is like glasses, like yellow glasses, and everything is colored with that yellow. We expect anger, and all we see out there is colored by that. It's just so magnetic. At the same time, when we understand that when people are acting badly and doing horrendous things, that they are like working under afflicted mind and burning. If we have that image of them as like people who are set on fire by their afflictions, we will have compassion to them. We will bring the water. We're not going to bring the fire. We're not going to bring our anger. We're going to bring our bodhicitta. So as practitioners, we start with the difficult places because we're no longer have that kind of naive notion that negativity arises out there and then comes to me and I'm affected by it. We don't go like little children. Well, he did it. He took it. He took my candy. He did this and this and this. No, we're working with our mind. We're asking ourselves always, what in this interdependence? Because when we say my enemy, it means I and that person are engulfed in this kind of level of energy that binds us together in that particular dance, in that particular coexistence. We're asking ourselves, what do I bring from my side? Because when I call someone my enemy, that means that I am looking through them, at them, and projecting onto them all of my anger, all of my affliction, my bitterness, my this, my that, because that person didn't give me something, didn't say the words that I wanted to hear, didn't act that I wanted them to act, didn't, took something away from me, destroyed something that was dear to me, etc., etc. We're not looking at them like people who are afflicted by mental disease, which is what ignorance is. Ignorance is mental disease, because it is always said the Buddhahood is discovered when the mental illness is removed. So as we're removing our own mental illness, please let's have like compassion for when we observe mental illness out there in the world all the time. Let's never forget the interdependent play, the dance from which we bring our afflictions onto them. And like it should always be a part of our practice. Bring the difficult person when we do a sitting session. Let's make that person the focus of our practice. Make that difficult person, visualize them in front of ourselves, and then send them love instead of this usual afflictive attitude. Learn how to work to diminish your afflictions. And that's why the state of, the mind of bodhicitta is the only kind of a remedy to not co-create these difficult negative situations. Mind of bodhicitta is the only thing that pierces through that stupidity that things are always made on that side. Somebody else is always responsible for all the bad things that happen to me. It's like we as practitioners, we can't think that way. That's not practice. Bodhicitta is always the right kind of mind. It is always the right kind of object of mind. So when you're dealing with a difficult person and your mind is filled with anger, you stepped away from that space of illumination and compassion, the warmth, the understanding, the warmth. And you have to come back to that. That's what practice is. And particularly Buddhist practice is, It's not like spacing out. It's, the particularity of Buddhist practice is to always know the state of one's mind. We went over the 37 Bodhisattva practices. We always ask, what is the state of my mind? And please watch out and be very, very mindful of people and situations where your anger and negative impulses take over and hijack the mind. Come back, remember. And that's when you sit on a cushion, please practice. Take the difficult person and send them love, send them love, send them love. Habituate yourself so that next time that difficult person walks into the room, that you can change your habitual response and not say, he did this, she did this, she's the bad one. Like, I'm not involved in that co-emergent dance. Nothing exists in itself and for itself independently. That's what emptiness means. It means that everything is interconnected. If I'm in a difficult situation, I am in that situation karmically, and also because I'm co-creating and writing it as it expands, as it unfolds. So remember, we have countermeasures. We have the mind of bodhicitta, which is we always have to cultivate that. If we look inside, and we should be always looking inside, not mind turned outward, mind turned inward. What is the state of my mind? Am I in this right motivation of bodhicitta? Am I thinking? Am I aspiring? Am I sending the people or being situations the right energy? Or am I being engulfed in my, whenever you're feeling like, why is this happening to me? Why is he doing this to me? Why is this so bad? And da 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 da. It's the mind of selfishness and self-attachment. That's really the cause of suffering. Our enemies and obstructors are not people and situations. Our enemies and obstructors are our mental attitudes. And that's what we understand. And that's what we practice by simply observing our thoughts and detaching, feeling the space of awareness on this kind of like, bigger scale, past our little tiny little spots. What we can do through that practice is that we can do twofold things. We can cultivate awareness of our Buddha nature, and we can cultivate being a little bit of detachment and like easing my thoughts, my feelings, me. We look at thoughts because, it's the space of meditation is where we look at what is this I am. It's nothing we can hold on to. It's another thought. What is this? I'm angry. It's another thought. It's only there because we have attachment and we want to bring it into our movie theater of our mind. It's not there by itself. It's there because it arises in co-emergent kind of together with my negative energy and with my negative mind. And so there are many, many complicated practices in Buddhism. We visualize ourselves as deities. We send, on the mantra and the sound and the light of the mantra, we go into the 6 realms, we liberate all beings. But there's also like super simple practices like Tonglen. Simply by practicing Tonglen while we walk around and do stuff, we are practicing all the time, nonstop. We don't need to make things complicated. breathe the white light into other beings. Or let's say you're working with your own illness, with your own difficulty, visualize all other beings included with you, and that they are also doing the same kind of practice together with you. Do that with your difficult people. Breathe the white light into your difficult situations. That's really practice. And always enter the practice space with this thought of, check your mind. Did I just rattle off those four immeasurables, or am I really like unlocking the selfish small space of my ego mind with this thought of the welfare of all sentient beings? There's no practice without using the key of bodhicitta. There is no practice without using it as the middle of doing the main practice. We're observing our mind in the main practice and distancing and relaxing the I and my thoughts, so that when we enter into situations with other beings, we can kind of relax and suspend our judgment and not be so childish. And in the end, we always dedicate all the merit. Like we had a beautiful meal, don't keep it just to yourself and have the merit dissipate. You have a beautiful meal, dedicate it for the welfare of all sentient beings. Visualize beings who are hungry, who don't have that, enjoying that meal with you. Having a glass of water, dedicated to all sentient beings. You can go to the toilet and say, may all the impurities leave everyone's, all my mother sentient beings, may all the impurities leave them. Take practice to everything with you, but what that requires is the mind of bodhicitta. It's having awareness of the benefit of all sentient beings. So that I just wanted to kind of bring that to our focus today, to explain what really is Buddhist practice and other things. And it's very unmistakable.
Thank you very much. So we'll go to some questions. The Q&A button on the toolbar in Zoom, you can write in a question. Can you give an example of what checking in might look like while commuting or doing some other repetitive task?
Our Garchen Rinpoche always says, there is no mundane thing in this universe that cannot be thought of as benefiting all sentient beings. When you pay your electrical bill, you can think of, I'm contributing to like the welfare of all others. Whatever we're doing, we can use our mind to think that whatever mundane thing. First of all, we can have the mind of gratitude. When we ride the subway, we think, wow, the luminous mind of others created this ease that I can put my butt on a seat and like magically arrive to the place of destination. So gratitude, awareness of others. And, any mundane thing can be dedicated to the welfare of others. Whatever you're doing, whatever your job is, if you work in a restaurant, you're washing dishes or you're cooking, think of it, you're doing it for the benefit of others. Whatever you do, even when you're walking, you can think, may all others walk behind me, and may we all walk the path toward enlightenment, past and transcending the suffering, may we walk together, a path to liberation, things like that.
Yeah, and this checking in, as you put it, is something that comes from repetition. It takes you starting to really make this a daily part of your life in the formal sitting practice. It's directly in the ratio to like how well you'll be able to check in during the commuting, or like you say, some other repetitive tasks. So it's very connected to your practice of daily meditation.
The more vast your mind becomes, and our minds can only become vast by awareness of others and desiring their welfare. That's kind of really that bigger space within which the little self-concerns arise. The more we habituate to that space, the more it'll be with us all the time, and so the practice will continue.
Can you please provide some synonyms for enlightenment?
Enlightenment, again, as I started, like, bodhicitta is not something that we can put into a graspable conceptual framework. We use words obviously to communicate with each other, so we have to have some kind of ways of being able to speak about it. Enlightenment, a synonym for enlightenment is this mind of complete knowing of reality and compassion that arises out of that state. It is, another word for it is Buddhahood. Uh, uh, you know, in some traditions we call it Mahamudra. It's really when the state, when the mind, which is, when our awareness is completely habituated to the view, and the view completely always acts for the benefit of all sentient beings. Rinpoche always says that meditation is nothing but habituation of the view.
Right, and by view, view in Buddhism encompasses things, impermanence, interdependence, shunyata, emptiness, the fact that nothing exists inherently on its own, right? This kind of goes into this next question about what does interdependence mean? Victoria was referring to things like, we have the illusion that if we go to the store and order a sandwich, our experience of it often is just once we get it and sit down in the park to eat it, is very much me and the sandwich. And the reality of that simple action of buying a sandwich, sitting in the park and eating it, immediately connects us, like she was saying, to countless beings, right? The bread, which comes from a bakery, which got the ingredients from a farm, which involves other animals and farmers and farmhands and shippers and truckers and a distributor and a guy who owns the store and someone who makes the sandwich. Maybe it's tuna fish, and then there's fish and fishermen and minnows that the tuna ate, and whatever algae that the other fish ate, and then the bag, which is made from paper or plastic, which was made in some kind of paper mill or factory, that was a tree that grew because the rain fell on it, and the birds that lived in the tree, and the park where you sit, that's tended by gardeners and landscape people, that was designed by an architect, things like that, right? Just in that one simple experience, you can start to piece together how interdependence works. It's just an illusion that I'm sitting there. It's a very kind of, our experience of reality is often very
Tiny,
narrow, subjective experience. For those who are more like scientific minded, if you think about things in terms of quantum physics, and that we don't really exist as these solid, independent beings, but more like fields of energy. When these particles get smaller and smaller and they keep discovering more, and they're really like waves of energy or this or that, that existence on a universal level is more about this gigantic field of energy than it is separate individual beings having this very narrow subjective experience. So that's a tiny little example.
And so what Michael just explained in a nutshell, when we talk about Buddhism, we talk about two truths, right? The ultimate state of all things. Why are we all interconnected? Well, we're not two separate things. Nothing is separated anywhere. It's only the mind, a simple, ignorant mind that separates things. And on a relative level, we think of this interconnectedness between objects and beings. And please think of it on this relative level. as compassion, because things die to be able to feed us. When even as vegetarians, when the fields get flooded by water to raise our rice, countless beings die. The chairs we sit on are homes for countless beings that live in trees and in the wood. Not to mention the kindness of our parents, because it's not like we could have survived or dressed or nurtured or done anything for ourselves for a very, very long time. We can't just crawl out of a mother's womb and, go get a job and provide. So we're connected to countless acts of compassion and a lot of times of tremendous sacrifice of other sentient beings, you know. So please think of it like that. It really helps the mind to cultivate the mind of bodhicitta, because that's just like having awareness and breaking down the stupid, kind of this childish thought, here I am alone with my sandwich. There's no such thing exists. We have to think in much more vast terms, because much more closer to reality of how things are. But the relative level is where we're still visualizing things and these interconnections, and then the ultimate level on which we are one thing, the absolute state of things.
So, in terms of interdependence as being part of the view of Buddhism, and enlightenment, to go back to that other question, is the realization of that. By realization, we don't mean just hearing it and maybe having a concept of it or some kind of, basic understanding of it. It's, maintaining and basically existing in that state, as a
Yes.
permanent basis. That's more what enlightenment is. Do you think individual manifestation as a practice isn't beneficial? That I'm not really sure about that word manifestation in Tibetan Buddhism and in the teachings that we've, received over, since, I don't know, 2007 or something like that. That word really has never come up. I have heard that word uh, related to some other practices, maybe Buddhism, maybe some other kind of spiritual or even Eastern practices, but I'm not really sure what that means. So I can't really speak to it. I'm learning to explain my Buddhism to skeptical family members. I was asked what the Buddhist higher power is, and I was unsure how to answer. Interconnectedness, compassion, and gratitude are Buddha minds. Yes, all those things. Those are tricky arguments because people are always kind of, especially people who come from more Abrahamic, religions like Christianity and Judaism and Islam and things like that, where there's God, there's this omniscient God. And Buddhism, there's not really the concept of a God. Buddha's not a God or treated as a God or worshipped as a God, but the nature of that all-encompassing interconnectedness, I think, is, that nature of that is what we're speaking to a little bit. So all those things, that interconnectedness, that compassion, uh, the Buddha mind, that exists within us. But looking at it as this higher power often is this external thing that's not us. That's where it gets tricky. And supplicating to this higher power to give us something or help us do something when we're really going within, that experience of interconnectedness. We're trying to tap into that from within, not from without.
And I also want to add that one of the major kind of differences in Buddhism, we go to teachers because of their realization. We think of Buddhas, but actually in Buddhism, it's so radically dependent on direct experience, and therefore, very radically dependent on the person, the practitioner themselves. The Buddha cannot take us to enlightenment. The Buddha cannot take away our karma. No one will take our hand and bring us to enlightenment. No one will change, our state from ignorance to enlightenment. It's like the teacher, the Buddha, can have all the medicine, but ultimately, if we are not changing a lifestyle, taking the medicine, nothing will really help. And so the big difference, I would say, and there's no need for argument, all religions are good. All religions also talk about love and compassion. The thing with Buddhism is that it so radically depends on our own activity. We have to get to that place on our own. It's direct experience of this interconnectedness. It is direct cultivation of love. We are responsible for being that drop in the ocean of love, where we have to transform ourselves from the state of ignorance and selfishness into that state of Buddhahood and complete love or compassion and luminosity, and be a part of the ocean as that drop like that. Depends on us. There's no one is coming to take us by the hand. No one is coming to take away something. We cannot go anywhere and get like a thing on the tongue and a drink of the water and stuff like this. And, we work on our own faults, chisel away at our own ignorance day by day by sitting in meditation, by practicing right speech, body, mind, things. That's a big, I think, difference. And, I feel like a lot of religions give us great precepts, but for us as Buddhist practitioners, we kind of start with great ethical systems, and we start that as kind of like the preliminary, and then the journey starts from that point. We're working on ourselves. It's not a collective thing. We as Buddhist practitioners, we never watch the minds of others. We always watch our own minds. And so it's not about kind of like arguing who's better, who's worse, et cetera, et cetera. It's really like finding our own Buddhahood by always aspiring for the welfare of all sentient beings. Maybe those are the kind of major differences, like what I, wanted to bring to our attention today, what makes a practice particularly Buddhist. We sit and we meditate on the welfare of all sentient beings. It's not just a wish. Yes, there's aspirational bodhicitta, then there's action bodhicitta, and then there's ultimate bodhicitta. But we always kind of start with the ultimate bodhicitta by remembering that we're all in it together at the same time, and then, we work on ourselves, on our internal individual mental space through the practices. I think that's what maybe some of the differences are. But we, in many ways, we have to always remember that what we work toward is something that we all already have. We all have mind of enlightenment. We all have Buddha nature. Every sentient beings, I mean, every and that doesn't mean just humans. All sentient beings have Buddha nature. Our opinions in the end are not that important. What's really important is the quality of our heart, of our mind. Can we tolerate differences? Can we, not be so judgmental? It really depends on who we are, much more so than the opinions we hold.
Last question we have time for. I've been studying different traditions, and Tibetan Buddhism speaks to me. I took refuge vows last year, and now I am ready for bodhisattva vows. The only physical temple near me is Theravadan. Does it matter? Thank you for doing this class. Well, Theravadan Buddhism doesn't take bodhisattva vows, although the Theravadan tradition is extremely rich and deep and rewarding on its own. Rather than look at separate them by differences. It's a different path leading to the same place. So that's up to you. There's not really a temple here that we go to regularly, but the connection we have with our teacher, you can take bodhisattva vows online now, believe it or not, with a teacher. That's been happening a lot, since the pandemic especially. But if you've taken refuge with someone in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition or Mahayana tradition, say, and you want to continue on that path, you can do it by making great efforts, by, going to teachings online, making an effort to go on retreats and teachings wherever this teacher may be, or teachers in that same tradition may be. But if you go to Theravadan temple that's in your area and you connect with it and it's meaningful and it's, becomes important to you, that's great. Then you should follow that as well.
May I just add, Theravadan, the first spinning of the wheel by the Buddha is considered our foundational first level entryway into the world of Buddhism, specifically the world of Buddhism. And so there is really, I cannot see a downfall practicing in that tradition and adding, the bodhisattva vows into it, because we shouldn't interpret the lesser and the bigger vehicle and things like that. Practice is practice, and the mind will mature when we kind of go away from working simply on our for the benefit of ourselves. When we include all others, we can bring that mind of including all others into any space with us. There's no fault.
And what's going to inspire you is important. If you go there to that temple and the teacher, the vibe, the song of the other members of the people who are there practicing, and if all that becomes very inspiring and moving you more towards deepening your practice, that's really what's important. So thank you for coming today. Thank you, Nick Solidio. We're very grateful for his generosity and kindness to make this class possible. As we do every week, the final thing we do here is dedicate the merit that has been cultivated from today's session to the benefit of all beings by saying this dedication prayer. By this merit may all beings attain the state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. And we see you next week. Thank you.